The abandoned cottage opening scene. It was meant to be a new beginning. When Liam and Sarah Collins left the noise of London behind for a quiet village in Somerset, they imagined peace, open fields, clean air, and a small stone cottage at the edge of the woods. Locals called it Rose Hill Cottage, though no roses had grown there in years. The estate agent said it was a bit of a fixer-upper, but Sarah fell in love with the ivy climbing the old brick walls. Inside, the air smelled faintly of wood smoke and damp. The floors creaked, but it felt alive, like the house was listening. Strange beginnings. The first few nights were peaceful. Liam fixed the old fireplace while Sarah unpacked books and hung pictures. But on the third night, she woke to a faint tapping, steady, deliberate, coming from the kitchen downstairs. Probably the pipes. Liam mumbled, half asleep. But the next morning the taps were dry, and the kitchen clock had stopped at 2:17 a.m. When she restarted it, the second hand ticked twice and froze again. The locked room. At the end of the hallway stood a narrow wooden door painted white, with a rusted latch that wouldn't move. The estate agent had said it led to an old storage space, but curiosity got the better of Liam. He fetched a screwdriver and pried the latch loose. Inside was a tiny room, bare except for an antique rocking chair facing the window and a single child's shoe lying beside it. As Sarah whispered, "Whose room was this?" The wallpaper peeled in shapes like little hands reaching. They closed the door quietly that night. But as Sarah walked away, the chair creaked once. A slow, rocking sound. The photograph. 2 days later, while cleaning the attic, Sarah found a dusty box of photographs. Most were ordinary. A family posing in front of the same cottage, dated 1980. But one photo caught her eye. A young girl in a blue dress sitting in the rocking chair downstairs. Behind her, in the window's reflection, a blurred figure loomed, tall, pale, and watching. Sarah blinked. The next moment, the photo slipped from her fingers and fell face down. When she picked it up again, the girl's eyes in the picture were closed. Village whispers. That evening, they visited the village pub for dinner. The bartender, an elderly man with tired eyes, asked, "You folks renting up at Rose Hill?" Liam smiled. "Just moved in. Nice place." The man's smile faded. "Aye, nice. Haven't had tenants last more than a few months. Strange things, they say." Sarah leaned closer. "Like what?" He shrugged. "Voices. Windows opening themselves. Child's laughter at night. But maybe it's just the wind. The footsteps. That night, a storm rolled in. Wind howled around the eaves, and rain drummed the roof. Liam was asleep, but Sarah woke to the sound of soft footsteps in the hallway. Small bare feet padding slowly toward their room. She held her breath. The steps stopped just outside the door. Then came a whisper. Faint, almost kind. "Don't wake him." The light bulb flickered. Sarah froze. When she finally opened the door, the hallway was empty. But muddy footprints, small, child-sized, led straight from the locked room to their bedroom door. Liam and Sarah Collins had always dreamed of escaping the noise of London. When they finally saved enough to buy a small place in the countryside, it felt like a new beginning. The cottage they found stood at the edge of a quiet village in Somerset. Locals called it Rose Hill Cottage, though there hadn't been roses around it for decades. The first time Sarah saw it, she fell in love instantly. The ivy climbing the stone walls, the narrow windows, and the way the woods stretched behind it. It all felt peaceful, untouched. Liam was less certain. The place looked old, too old, and the silence that surrounded it was heavier than he expected. But Sarah smiled when she saw it, and that was enough for him. When they moved in, everything felt calm. The air smelled of rain and pine. There was a gentle wind through the trees. It was quiet in a way London never had been. For the first few days they were too busy unpacking to notice anything strange. But on the third night, Sarah woke to a faint tapping sound. It was steady, almost rhythmic, coming from the kitchen. She thought it might be the old pipes. Liam, half asleep, told her to ignore it. But when morning came, she found the kitchen clock stopped at exactly 2:17 a.m. She wound it again, and the second hand ticked twice before freezing. At the end of the hallway upstairs was a small white door with a rusted latch. The real estate agent had said it led to an unused storage space. Liam, curious, decided to open it. The latch resisted but gave way with a sharp snap. The room was narrow, barely wide enough for a bed. Inside stood a wooden rocking chair facing the window, and beside it lay a single child's shoe, small and dusty. Sarah stared for a long moment, the wallpaper peeled in long strips, curling like little hands. The air felt colder there. She whispered, "Whose room was this?" But no one answered. Liam closed the door, saying they'd fix it later. That night, as they walked away, the chair behind the door gave one soft creak. The days that followed felt stranger. The air inside the cottage was never completely still. Sometimes Sarah thought she heard whispering in the walls, faint and quick, like someone speaking from behind them. She tried to convince herself it was wind or the old wood settling, but something about the sound felt deliberate, like words she couldn't quite catch. A few days later, while cleaning the attic, Sarah found a box covered in dust. Inside were old photographs of a family standing in front of the same cottage. Most were ordinary, a father, a mother, and a young girl. But one photo made her heart stop. It showed the girl in the same rocking chair downstairs. Behind her, reflected in the window, stood a tall, pale figure watching her. Sarah blinked and almost dropped the photo. When she looked again, the girl's eyes were closed, though she was sure they had been open before. Her hands shook as she placed the picture back in the box. That evening she didn't mention it to Liam. They decided to visit the local pub that night. The place was old, wooden, and smelled faintly of smoke. The bartender, an elderly man with heavy eyes, asked where they were staying. When Liam said, "Rose Hill Cottage," the man's smile disappeared. "Haven't had anyone stay there long," he said quietly. "Strange things happen. Voices, doors that open themselves, laughter at night." He gave a small shrug. "But maybe it's just the wind." Sarah didn't sleep well that night. Rain fell hard against the windows, and the house creaked under the weight of the storm. Around midnight, she woke to the sound of soft footsteps outside their bedroom door. Light, almost playful, like a child's bare feet on wood. She held her breath and listened. The steps stopped. A whisper followed. Quiet, almost gentle. "Don't wake him." Sarah froze. The voice was right outside the door. She turned slowly toward Liam, who was still asleep beside her. The light flickered once, then steadied. When she finally gathered the courage to open the door, no one was there. But on the floor, leading from the end of the hallway to their room, were muddy footprints. Small ones. A child's. Sarah stood motionless for a long time before closing the door again. When she glanced at the clock on the bedside table, its hands had stopped. At 2:17 a.m. The next morning, Sarah tried to tell Liam what had happened. He listened quietly but didn't say much. He thought she might be dreaming, half asleep from the storm. Yet when she showed him the small muddy footprints in the hallway, his face turned pale. They were real, each one crisp, leading straight to their bedroom, and ending at the door. They checked every window and door. All were locked from the inside. There was no sign of anyone breaking in. "Maybe it was water leaking through," Liam said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Sarah didn't argue. Later that day, she walked to the small village library. It was barely more than 2 rooms with a low ceiling and the smell of damp paper. She asked the librarian if she knew anything about Rose Hill Cottage. The woman hesitated, then pulled out a thin folder. "People don't talk about it much," she said softly. The folder held old newspaper clippings, yellowed with age. The first headline read, "Local family disappears without a trace, 1981. Sarah's heart thudded as she read the names. Thomas, Margaret, and Emily Foster. Emily, the girl in the photograph. The report said the family had moved to the cottage that summer and vanished a few months later. The police found no signs of struggle, just an unlocked door and a half-eaten dinner on the table. The final line said, "The only item discovered out of place was a single child's shoe near the upstairs window." Sarah closed the folder, her hands trembling. That night, she told Liam everything. He was quiet for a long time, staring at the rain on the window. "It's just stories," he said finally. "People disappear all the time. We shouldn't let this scare us." But Sarah could see the fear behind his calm tone. That night, they both left the hallway light on. Around 3 a.m., a faint sound woke Sarah again. A lullaby. Soft, sweet, sung by a voice that didn't belong to her. It drifted up from the small white room at the end of the hall. Liam didn't wake this time, no matter how hard she shook him. His breathing was deep and steady, almost unnaturally so. Sarah stood slowly, her bare feet cold against the wood. The house felt heavier, like the air itself didn't want her to move. She walked toward the white door. The lullaby stopped as soon as she touched the handle. The silence that followed was unbearable. When she opened the door, the small room was exactly as before. Empty, still, cold. But the rocking chair was moving gently, as if someone had just stood up from it. On the seat lay a child's drawing, done in faded crayon. A house, 2 tall figures and a small girl standing between them, all holding hands. Behind them was a dark scribbled shape that looked like smoke. Across the bottom, written in shaky letters, were the words, "I tried to tell them." The next morning, Sarah showed Liam the drawing. He stared at it, frowning. "Where did you find this?" "In the small room." "That can't be. I cleaned that room yesterday. There was nothing there." Sarah didn't respond. Days passed. The cottage seemed to change. Doors that once creaked open now refused to move. Windows fogged from the inside even when the weather was clear. Sarah began keeping her phone camera on, recording small clips whenever she felt uneasy. Once, she caught something, a faint reflection of a child's face in the mirror behind her. When she showed it to Liam, he deleted it. "You're letting this place get in your head," he said sharply. But the next evening it was Liam who froze in the kitchen doorway. Sarah followed his gaze. The dining table had been set, 2 plates, 2 glasses, and a small bowl in the center filled with apples. The same bowl that had been locked away in a cupboard since they moved in. Liam whispered, "I didn't do this." Then they both heard it. Faint, echoing laughter, drifting from somewhere deep within the house. They left that night and slept in the car. But the next morning when they came back, everything looked normal again. The table was empty, the dishes gone. The only thing different was a note placed neatly on the kitchen counter. It read, "She wants to come home." After finding the note, neither Liam nor Sarah spoke much. The words, "She wants to come home," stayed in Sarah's mind all day, looping like a quiet echo she couldn't silence. That evening, Liam suggested leaving the cottage for a few days. But Sarah refused. "We can't just run," she said softly. "What if she's trying to tell us something?" Liam looked at her, concerned. "Sarah, she's not real." But Sarah wasn't so sure anymore. Something about the house felt alive. Not just haunted. but aware. The creaks, the whispers, the strange stillness between every gust of wind. It was as if the house itself was waiting. That night, Sarah dreamed of the girl from the photograph. She stood in the small white room, her back turned. When she turned around, her eyes were dark, her face pale and sad. "Please," the girl whispered. "Tell him to stop looking." Sarah woke up gasping. The clock on the bedside table read 2:17 a.m. again. The air smelled faintly of burnt wood. When she reached for Liam, his side of the bed was empty. She found him downstairs in the living room, standing completely still in front of the old fireplace. "Liam," she said softly. He didn't move. His eyes were fixed on something in the ashes. Sarah stepped closer and saw what he was holding. A small silver locket, blackened at the edges. Inside was a photo of a child, Emily Foster. "Where did you find that?" she whispered. "In the wall," Liam said slowly. "I heard something behind it. I thought it was rats, but then I saw light coming through a crack. It was buried in there." Sarah touched the locket gently. The metal was cold, unnaturally cold. The next few days blurred together. Sarah felt tired all the time, like something was draining her. Sometimes she'd wake to find the bedroom window open, the curtains swaying in a wind that shouldn't have been there. She'd close it only to wake again with it open. Then one morning Liam found her standing in the small white room, staring at the wall. Her eyes were distant, unfocused. "Sarah?" he said. She turned to him slowly, her voice faint. She was hiding here. She didn't want to go. Liam felt a chill crawl up his spine. "What are you talking about?" Sarah pointed to the wall. "There's something behind it." They pulled away the wallpaper together. Beneath the faded layers they found carvings. Names scratched into the wood. Emily, Mum, Dad. And below them, a small handprint, pressed deep into the paint. Behind the wall they found a hollow space, barely large enough for a child to crawl into. Inside lay an old toy rabbit, its fur grey with dust. Sarah began crying quietly. "She was hiding," she said. "When they disappeared, she was hiding in here." That night, the wind howled outside, and the house moaned with every gust. Liam stayed awake, listening. Around 2:17 a.m., he heard footsteps again, light, quick, running across the upstairs hall. Then came laughter, soft and broken, followed by a whisper close to his ear. "Don't let her find me." He turned sharply, but no one was there. The next morning, Sarah was gone. Her phone lay on the bedside table. Her shoes were still by the door. The only thing missing was her coat and the small locket. Liam ran outside, calling her name through the cold morning mist. The woods behind the cottage swallowed his voice. Hours later, he found her at the edge of the forest, barefoot, her hands covered in dirt. She was digging into the ground with her fingers. When he tried to pull her back, she resisted, whispering, "She's here," I heard her crying. When they finally stopped, they saw what she had uncovered. A small wooden box, rotted from time. Inside were the remains of an old stuffed rabbit, a pair of tiny shoes, and a rusted key. Sarah looked at the key for a long moment, then whispered, "It's for the cellar. They had never opened the cellar." The door was locked when they moved in, and neither of them had ever tried to force it. That night, they stood in front of it, the key trembling in Sarah's hand. "Maybe we shouldn't," Liam said. "She wants us to," Sarah replied. The key turned easily. The door creaked open, and a smell of damp earth and something old rose from the darkness. They stepped down slowly. The air grew colder with each step. At the bottom they found shelves lined with jars, old tools, and boxes covered in cobwebs. But at the far end of the cellar stood something that froze them both. A wooden crib, small and empty, rocking gently even though there was no wind. On the wall above it were faint marks, more words scratched into the stone. Sarah raised her phone's flashlight and read them aloud. "Don't open the door. She'll never leave." Suddenly, the light flickered. The door at the top of the stairs slammed shut. Liam shouted, running toward it, but it wouldn't move. Sarah's light went out, plunging them into darkness. Then came the sound. A soft hum. A lullaby. The same tune Sarah had heard before. It grew louder, closer, until it was right beside them. And in that darkness, Sarah felt a small cold hand slip into hers. Sarah froze where she stood, her breath shallow, her heart hammering in her chest. That small cold hand gripped hers tightly. Not with force, but with fear. The air around her was icy, thick with the scent of damp earth and something faintly sweet, like old perfume. She couldn't see anything. The cellar was swallowed in darkness. "Liam," she whispered, but her voice was barely audible. The humming stopped. Silence fell again, complete, heavy, almost unnatural. And then a child's voice spoke softly in front of her. "She's angry." Sarah felt tears sting her eyes. "Who?" she whispered. "The one who made me stay." The sound of the voice was trembling, full of sadness, not malice. Sarah slowly raised her phone again, her thumb shaking as she switched on the flashlight. The beam of light trembled across the cellar walls, until it landed on a small figure standing by the crib. A little girl, pale, dressed in an old white nightgown, her hair tangled and grey with dust. Her eyes, dark and deep, looked right into Sarah's. "You found me," the girl said quietly. Sarah nodded, unable to speak. Liam stood frozen a few steps behind, his face drained of color. The girl tilted her head slightly. "He locked me down here, said I was bad, said I made them go away." Tears rolled down Sarah's face. "Who did?" The girl looked toward the far wall, where an old photograph hung crookedly, half covered in grime. A man, woman, and child, smiling in front of Rosehill Cottage. The same picture Sarah had seen upstairs. Only this time something was different. A man's hand rested tightly on the little girl's shoulder, his fingers digging in too hard. The girl's voice cracked. "He wouldn't let me go outside. He said if I did, they'd come back for me. But they never did." Liam whispered, "Thomas Foster." The name hung in the air like a shadow. The little girl stepped closer. "She came for me last night," she said, her voice trembling. "My mum." But he stopped her. "He won't let us leave." The lights flickered again. Somewhere in the darkness, wood creaked. Slow, deliberate steps moving closer. The air grew colder. Liam grabbed Sarah's arm. "We need to go." But Sarah couldn't move. She felt something in the air shift, a pressure, like the house itself was breathing. The shadows on the wall stretched, long and distorted. And then, out of the darkness near the stairs, a shape began to form. Tall, broad, a man, or what was left of one. His face half hidden, features blurred as though smeared by time. He stood at the bottom of the steps, his head tilted toward the crib. "Go upstairs," he said, his voice deep, cracking through the silence. "She belongs here." Sarah shook her head, trembling. "She's just a child." The figure stepped closer. The air grew colder still. "She's mine." The little girl screamed, a sound that pierced the cellar like breaking glass. The flashlight flickered violently. Liam lunged forward, grabbing Sarah's hand, pulling her toward the stairs. The man's shadow reached for them, stretching unnaturally long across the floor. Sarah clutched the locket still hanging around her neck. It burned against her skin, hot, alive. She raised it toward the shadow and shouted, You can't keep her anymore." There was a blinding flash of light, and then silence. When Sarah opened her eyes, she was lying on the ground at the top of the cellar stairs. The door was wide open. The air felt lighter. The humming was gone. Liam helped her up, his hands shaking. The cellar below was empty. No crib, no shadow, no little girl. Just cold air and dust. They didn't speak as they packed their things. By morning they were gone. A week later, Sarah sat by the window of a small bed and breakfast in Bath, staring out at the rain. She hadn't spoken much since that night. Liam tried to comfort her, but something about her felt different. Quieter. As if a part of her still lingered in that cottage. That evening, as she unpacked her bag, she found the locket again. She didn't remember taking it with her, but there it was, resting at the bottom of her purse. The photo inside had changed. Now it showed the little girl smiling, standing in a field of flowers. Sarah smiled faintly for the first time in days. She whispered, "You're free now." But just as she closed the locket, her phone buzzed. A notification appeared. A video recording from her old camera, time-stamped 2:17 a.m. the night they left. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The screen showed the small white room, dimly lit. The rocking chair moved slowly on its own. Then the door creaked open, and a woman stepped in. It was Sarah. But not the Sarah watching the video. The woman in the recording looked directly into the camera, her expression calm, her eyes soft. "She's safe now," she said quietly. "But someone has to stay." The video ended there. Sarah stared at the blank screen for a long time, her reflection faintly visible. Behind her, through the window, the rain had stopped, and in the distance, far beyond the hills, the lights of Rose Hill Cottage flickered once, then went dark forever. End of story. The Abandoned Cottage.